Welcome back to the Aesthetic Edit podcast. Today is our last episode of the season.
But don't worry, we'll be back. We're just taking a little break.
We got to have a little summer vacation like we all do.
Of course.
Let's catch up on what's been happening the past few weeks.
There has been a lot happening.
What happened on Wednesday?
So I'm officially now an aunt to two beautiful little boys. I was 1-to-1 and then another one entered the world on Wednesday.
Oh my
gosh. But the birthing story, y'all are going to freak out. So my sister-in-law, Christian's sister, gave birth in a parking lot of the birthing center on Wednesday. This was her second baby boy and she wanted to do it very naturally. And so she picked this beautiful birthing center so that they could help her. She had a doula, a midwife and everything. And on her way to the birthing center, her water broke and she stepped out of the car and the baby started coming out of her. Gravity was really doing its thing.
It was time. He was ready to make his appearance.
He was ready. He was like a week late. A week
really?
Late. Yeah. His due date was last Thursday.
Oh.
And
I would be like, we got to get this show on the road.
100%. She stepped out of the car and her husband, Armani, was like honking the horn trying to get the people to come outside, and he goes over and she's like, the baby is literally coming.
We got to just do it right now.
And he was like, no way. And looked and the head was almost out. And so he delivered his own baby, which is an incredible story.
I love that.
And then handed the baby to the mom and then ran inside and said, hey, by the way, we just had my wife give birth.
We might need some help.
The placenta's coming. Please help us. So, but yes.
What a
Duke
miracle.
Isaiah. Such a cute
Duke Isaiah. That's a cute name.
Came out 7 pounds, 10 ounces.
Wow.
He is the chunkiest cheeks I've ever seen in my entire life. And they are so cute.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, he's a cutie. Beautiful
what
family.
A miracle. That is so exciting.
Crazy birthing story.
Yeah.
What about you? What have you been up to?
We went to Virginia this week. We did a shoot. It was so fun.
So fun.
And now I'm preparing to go on vacation. I've not been on one in a while.
You need a vacation. We love a good vacation.
What was I supposed to mean?
You've earned it.
They're like, get out of the office. You're driving us crazy.
No, we're never gonna say that.
It's okay. I get it. I can have some self-awareness. I'm aware.
No, just go have some fun.
Oh, we're gonna have so much fun. So I'm bringing my realtor turned new best friend. We just like clicked instantly.
She's a sweetheart.
We both have a passion for yoga, real estate. She's an entrepreneur as well. So we're gonna go to San Diego and we're gonna have a lot of fun. We're going to go to Seneca. It's an Italian restaurant that we love. We're going to go to Kettner Exchange. We really want to take surfing lessons.
Oh my gosh.
So
that is so fun.
We're going against what I normally do. So I'm a big planner. Yes. So I like to make itineraries for trips. Naturally. And I pick all the best places. I do all the research on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram.
I would love to go on a trip with you and just not have to think about one thing.
Well, this trip, we're trying something new this year. I'm not going to plan anything.
How do you feel?
I don't know. We're just going to go.
Just going to wing it.
And we're going to see what we run into.
What led to surfing lessons?
The idea of a very nice man teaching us how to surf on a surfboard.
Understood.
Yeah.
You will have a blast.
That sounded like a dream come true, honestly. So I was like, let's just go ahead and go for it.
No, that'll be so fun.
Yeah.
I went to San Diego like years ago and it was gorgeous there.
Yeah.
And I went like in spring break time, but I feel like as we go into summer, the weather's probably just going to be even prettier because it doesn't get super hot.
It's just such a vibe. I love La Jolla. I love Southern California.
And it's been rainy here.
Yeah.
Get out of the rain.
It's an easy getaway. And I'm waiting for my passport to come in. So there's that piece too.
Oh,
so,
yeah. No, love that.
Anyways, well, okay. So lots of fun summer plans. But today, we are so excited because we have someone in our studio who has been in this industry for almost a decade. He and his company and his team, they specialize in helping ambitious entrepreneurs in the aesthetic space take their practice to multi-locations. They help them sell the practice, and their background, their knowledge, their expertise is truly beyond. And if you are someone who really wants to take your practice to the next level and make this not only a career, but a lifestyle, then you need to know about Ben and his team. So welcome, Ben Hernandez with SkyTale.
Welcome.
We're so excited to have you here.
I've been looking forward to this. Thanks so much for having me, and to close out the season, it's an honor.
Yeah. Last episode of the season.
We are so excited to have you. You are You guys are you are everywhere. I know that you said you have 48 shows this year. Your business has grown so fast. So we have so many questions.
So many.
Just naturally for our audience, for us as well. How did you get started in this space?
Yeah, the way I got started in this space, my background is in finance. So did investment banking, worked at a hedge fund, and then I moved over to a company that did tax accounting consulting. I led the consulting department there, and it was kind of dumb luck. It happened to be heavy physician with dentists and so forth. And in 2015, we had a client that was an aesthetics client, so had to learn about that. And I just fell in love with the just entrepreneurs that we were working with. And they're the ones who kind of gave me the ability, the permission, if you will, to found SkyTale. I always wanted to be a business owner since I was a kid. We have family members who are, I remember we had a professor, he was one of the co-founders of hotels.com. And he said, you ought to do it now because the chips get taller as you get older. Maybe you have a family, maybe you have a mortgage, maybe you're making more money. And everything he said came true. And so I thought it's never going to happen for me. Yeah. And I also thought you had to be infallible to be a business owner, right? And turns out you don't. So it was the doctors themselves, I was like, they went to medical school, whatever. And they're the ones who kind of gave me the permission, if you will, like, wait a minute, they went to medical school and they have these ambitions. So that's how we got started. That's how we were founded.
That is so cool. I love that you've niched into healthcare, aesthetics, dentistry, wellness. And I think it's so fascinating to realize that the clients we serve, they go to school for, 10 years almost in a sense. And there's no part of that curriculum that covers things like finance, management, business. They're just expected to enter the system or enter a hospital or whatever it is and just figure it out. So there's people like you who have a background in finance and business that they need you if they truly are going to create a business and a brand and really go out there and share their gifts on a much more scalable model. So what do you think has just really allowed your business to grow with knowing that, you guys are able to support these clients? What are some of the areas that you find you guys are able to really pour into these businesses?
Yeah, the areas that we can pour into it, let's take just the way that we got into medical aesthetics, right? Is when we did that, it was 2015 or 16. And at the firm, it was like, hey, we have this medical aesthetics client in Dallas. I was like, okay, what the heck is this? I knew conceptually what it was, but I didn't know exactly how do you serve this client? Yeah. So the way that we did it is I had to study, okay, what is medical aesthetics? What's the market cap size, right? How big is it? And then you start looking at what's the trajectory of growth? How is revenue even made? I didn't know what an injector was or what have you. Yeah. So you have to learn every single thing about what makes not only the market drive and how impressive it is, but then who makes it up and what are the key pieces of it. So once you learn that, so if you think about that, that's exactly what we specialize in, is understanding not just the market and the space. And that's what made us fall in love with it. You can go down the checklist items of the high growth and, patients come in happy, they leave happy. And it's just such a beautiful space. And that's why we dove into it. But if you think just conceptually of that, we have to understand everything about the business. So a lot of our clients, maybe they went to medical school and they teach you how to be a fantastic doctor, how to do great patient care and so forth. But they don't teach you how to manage your business. And that part is missing. And so a lot of people who call us, maybe they're managing how well they're doing by their bank account. And maybe they're managing, I feel like I need to hire someone because I'm booked out 8 weeks. Well, it's too late by then, right? So people who use us, it's more so, how do I forecast the business forward? There's where I am today. But what's really important, especially if you're growing and scaling, is where exactly do I want to go? So you start implementing little things like, for example, maybe when you're, depending on how fast you're growing, maybe when you're at 70% capacity as a provider, that's a time to bring on a new one. Because why would you be booked out 6 to 8 weeks? Yeah. Or why would you have a wait list? Because what happens then is I'll call someone else. So you're losing potentially a patient. Yes. So you put all of these practices in place that as best as you can, you start putting systems and processes and procedures. And that's kind of the basis and the jump off point for being able to build just a really impressive, beautiful business where you're understanding all of the metrics of what's happening. And then below that, your team members start understanding what success means in their practice. So that's how we typically help.
That's so interesting. I know you mentioned earlier of if you're already booked out this far in advance, it's too late to bring somebody like y'all on. How do people know when it's time to hire a company like you at SkyTale?
Yeah, I think, if I think about the avatar of someone who calls us, they're thinking, hey, look, I have a successful business. Maybe I have multiple practices. I think all of them have an ambition to grow their business. Typically, they have an ambition to go multi-site location or already are. And a good time to call us is either when you're planning on doing that, or oftentimes we get phone calls like, hey, I felt good locations 1 and 2 because I was there. I'm running a lean operation. But wait a minute, like location 4, 5, I don't really know what's going on. I can't be in 5 locations. Your profitability may go down because if you think about this, when you have 1 location, it's a pretty lean organization. You're probably the provider, producer. You maybe have some staff. But when you go 4 or 5 locations, you're probably adding corporate overhead. You're going through what we call the dark tunnel. You're reinvesting in your business. Maybe there's a margin suppression. And unless you understand the concepts of why and how to get out of that, you maybe panic. You're like, wait, maybe I shouldn't have done this. Where that's not necessarily the answer because you're adding corporate overhead so you can continue to expand and add. So I would say if you're thinking of growing, if you're thinking of scaling, if you don't have clarity, either operationally or financially, into why you're performing the way you are, that's a really good time to call us.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I'm also curious because you're a business owner yourself. You work with other business owners. What are some key traits and characteristics of the very successful business owners, entrepreneurs who are able to scale to 5, 10, 20 locations and make a really successful exit? Almost in comparison to the ones that are really stuck in that like 1 location, just getting things off the ground. Like what are the things that type of owner has that's selling at that high number? Have you seen?
Yeah, there are a lot of similarities. I would say 1, there's the ambition, obviously. I would say 2, a lot of them want to get out of being a provider, if you will. They want to become a true business owner, a CEO. So you start balancing, when do I stop injecting, for example, and what's the formula there? I would say another one is there's got to be a humility there in a sense, because what you're doing is you're letting go. People are firing you from things. So as you grow from 1 location, you're anything and everything to your team. You're the center of attention. If you have 15 locations, a lot of your team doesn't really know you that well. And the only people who do are your leadership team, who you entrust to run this vision of your business. So we like to say you go from a vision-led business, a founder-led business rather, to a vision-led business. And how you do that is you incorporate all of these tools. You put the DNA in the business. You start training your leadership team. This is where we're going. This is how we're getting there. You always have to check on how you're doing, how you're pacing. And location 20 ought to have the same culture and feel as location 1. And, culture gets thrown around a lot, but it is so key. I mean, I'll give you an example at SkyTale. One of the ways that we've grown is we have to have team members who are collegiate, ambitious, but, we have, like everyone else, principles and core values. But 2 that are super key from a day-to-day is radical transparency and best idea wins. What that means is if I ever do something that you don't like, you have the right, in fact, you have the responsibility to let me know. So what that does, if you think about it, is it creates this 360 degree, everyone always knows where you are. You're always on the same page. You eliminate talking behind people's back. And then the best idea wins piece that goes along with that is if the janitor walks by and has a better idea than I do, we're going with that idea. There's no title to it. And so the culture piece, and it's not for everyone, by the way. Some people don't like radical transparency. But I think our very successful owners know exactly who they are, and that's how they run their business.
To learn more about the Aesthetic Edit Podcast, follow us on social media at the Aesthetic Edit Podcast. We can be found on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
We'd love to hear from you if you have show ideas or guest recommendations for our future podcast episodes. Speaking of humility, I love that word, especially in leadership, because I think it's so important. Have you started to experience being fired from certain pieces of the business?
What haven't I been fired for? From Yes, actually, it's fascinating taking me down memory lane. When we were founded, I was the janitor, everything.
Yeah.
And certainly from a client-facing perspective, I was their consultant. It was me. And then we had to bring on an analyst and so forth. But I was the one providing that service. If we sold a company, I was the one providing that service. I was putting some of the models together, some of the PowerPoints. As we grew, we're now 21 people and looking for 2 more. As we've grown, we now had a head of consulting, right? And she's unbelievably talented and amazing and much better than I. So I like to joke that, and this is good, it's one of those things, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yeah.
And I like to joke, although it's not a joke, if I sent my resume today to the firm, I don't think they would hire me. And that's really cool because she's been able to take everything consulting. I have 0 consulting clients today, which is surreal. It's a little bit interesting. And on the investment banking firm side, it's the same concept. I haven't run a deal in quite some time. I didn't think that would ever happen.
Yeah.
And so what that does is you have this team that's actually better than you are at what you're doing, but they're leading the firm the way that SkyTale was meant to be led. And they honor that and they hold that. And then what that does is you have to be okay letting go. You have to be okay and trusting your clients and your baby to team members and trust that they'll, fulfill your vision.
Yeah.
So then what that does is you're no longer doing what you were doing yesterday.
Yeah.
So you have to learn new skills. So now my skill set that I'm working on is, how do I now lead a firm? How do I lead this vision to fruition and not fail the team members that are so talented, that believed in this vision? My job is, you cannot fail them. You have to do what you said the firm was going to do. So how do you lead the firm? How do you lead them? How do you grow them so they can grow their people? And that's an entirely different skill set.
Yeah, that's all of that's so good. And you have to have a growth mindset. I've heard a couple of things. One of the things I've heard on a podcast recently is owning and scaling a business is one of the most triggering things you'll ever do, because it forces you to look in the mirror on a daily basis, right? So you have to have that growth mindset. You have to have that humility, and you have to be able to learn and grow new skills, like you said. And the other thing that people say is that as you build the business, the business is building you. So we were talking about this before the episode. I love how you work with an executive coach, right? Because your company is scaled so quickly. You're hiring 2 more. You'll have a team of 23, 24 very soon. So what has your experience been with executive coaching, and why would you recommend that to anybody that really wants to scale their business quickly?
It's been game changing. As I mentioned, my job used to be technical. If I'm good technically at understanding how to scale you, if I'm good technically at understanding high finance and how to sell your business, that's a very different skill. And I went to school for that. So I know that. I understand Excel, I understand finance, so on and so forth, I understand scaling. No one goes to school for how do you lead very talented people. And that requires introspection. It requires, I had a client say, isn't a business the best ideal version of ourselves? And I thought that was interesting. And so for me, executive coaching was important because you don't truly know who you are. Even if you're introspective, it requires another party to really let you know, these are your habits. This is your day to day. Because just like in business, if you do something every day, even if it's inefficient, you'll get accustomed to it. I am who I am. And it takes somebody else letting me know, here's a mirror. So for me, executive coaching has allowed me to realize what my strengths are and continue to push on those, and what opportunities or weaknesses that I may have, and which ones matter to the business that we're running, right? So for example, like maybe social responsibility doesn't matter at an investment banking firm and management consulting, right? But other things do. Impulse control matters. Decision-making matters. So it really allows you to understand, this is who you are as a leader. This is how you lead. And this is how your team teaches you. You're training them. So they're reacting to the way that you are. And that's one of the things I'm working on right now.
That's so good.
That is so good. And I know that's something actually for the past year as the social practice, Mary, you've been doing a great job of trying to build out the leadership team so that you can then kind of step out of the role that you were currently in and so much of the operations and more of just kind of being the face of the company, networking with referral partners, sales opportunities. So that's something that I think every business needs to really kind of keep in mind is you need to be able to delegate in order to grow and scale your business as the CEO and founder. And when I'm thinking of that, I would love to know if with you doing that for your team at SkyTale, what tangible tips do you have for providers that are wanting to then grow and scale their practice, but they have to do so in hiring? What things should they be looking for to build up their leadership team through hiring and then also training people into those leadership positions?
Great question. So if I'm talking leadership team specifically, the way that I first look at it is, before a football game, they have who has the best quarterback, who has the best secondary. So the way I start is I want all of those check boxes relative to my competition, right? So I would say, what positions do you need in leadership team? And the way that I would decide that early on, because you have to start at one, you're not going to hire all 6 at a time, right?
Yeah, you can't.
So exactly.
I wish we could.
Exactly.
That would be great
If we just had unlimited budget, we would hire everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I would too. Wouldn't that be nice? We talk to our clients about start with what do you want to do? Ultimately, you're the founder owner. And what are you good at? So what do I want to do and what am I good at? The things you don't like to do or that you're weak at, start your leadership team there because that's going to give you the best ROI. Then when you're looking at that individual, I would hire slowly.
Okay.
At the leadership position, it's very difficult to miss because you have to start over. So I would hire slowly. I would look at multiple candidates that have are they going to be a culture fit? I think that's so important. Do they buy into the vision of what you're building and where you're going? You want people that are going to get on that train because they're going to have to teach people how to get on the train beneath them.
Yeah.
And then I would look at the skill sets, obviously. Like if you're hiring a COO, have they run multi-site healthcare? Have they run something like it? Maybe it can be retail, something tangential. But I would really look for they have the skill set. They've done this. Because it's very hard to train that skill set because they should be better than you at it. That's the thesis behind it. So I would look at those 3 things initially. And, again, I would look at multiple people before deciding on the one.
Slow to hire, quick to fire.
Yeah.
Is that what it is? Did I say that the right
That's right.
Okay, good. So as a business owner myself, one of the things I'm working on right now is practicing discernment between when to move forward, when to pull back. And it is impulse control. So what do you think is a way to really exercise and practice having more awareness in moments whenever you really want to just charge forward?
That's funny. I'm actually working on the same thing. So
perfect.
Who isn't?
This is like a free counseling session.
Who isn't working on that?
And this is one of the things about the executive coaching is you take all these tests and it's not just one, it's multiple and you time together. And apparently one of my weakest spots and certainly the weakest one that we're working on is impulse control and more specifically within that avoidance, which actually sounds like avoidance. That's good, right?
Yeah.
Like don't avoid. But it's not because from an impulse control perspective, I'll give you a quick example. If a team member walks by my office and they say, hey, Ben, can I catch up with you later today? I have an update. My lack of impulse control, my lack of avoidance forces me to say, whoa, Mary, no, like come in my office, tell me now. Yeah. Now, if you're busy at that time, what do? I've just disrupted your day. I've disrespected and not acknowledge the fact that you wanted to talk to me later.
Yeah.
And my mind goes to, the reason I do that is my mind goes to, what if it's really bad?
Yeah.
What if the firm's going under?
We gotta fix
what
it.
If, what
It's
if we can act on
there?
Yes.
Mary and I do that all the time because we'll walk by each other's offices and I'm like, do you have 5 minutes? And Mary's like, do you have 5 minutes? And it's the impulse you're saying, like you immediately are like, oh my gosh, yeah, I have 5 minutes, come in here, even though I'm in the middle of doing something. I want to hear what we're needing to talk about. So it's so easy together. But how are you avoiding or how are you moving away from doing that?
Great question. So the first question that my coach asked me is, how many times has it been, oh yeah, we're about to go under, but I was going to tell you at 5 p.m. And it's like, never. He said, so it's never been this worst case scenario that you have in your mind.
Yeah.
And I said, never. He said, your team is intelligent. Very. trust them to let you know if the firm's going under, that they'll run into your office with a fire hose.
Yeah.
Like, great. So that's one. And then the way that I act on it now and recognize it, because that's a key, right? Is you are who you are. Now you have to recognize it to up level yourself. Is I have this little rubber band.
Love this so much.
I was wondering, it doesn't look like you have a ponytail.
All the tools that we can get, we'll take. Okay.
It's not for my ponytail. It's for if you ever walk by my office and you say, I need to talk to you.
Yeah.
Just
And
snap
I say-
yourself.
And you say,
And I say, no. And it brings me back to who I want to be as a leader.
Mm.
And these are the things that you continue, because otherwise you're training your team based on how you act as a leader. And you don't ever want to be someone who's like, I'm not going in there until I'm ready to talk to him.
I have a question for you on this. So are you transparent with your team? I know you have the transparency as one of your core values. Are you transparent with your team on what you're working on as a leader so that they can be aware and assist you, and maybe not walk by and say, can I talk to you later, but maybe send you a calendar invite for like later that day instead? Are you transparent with them so they're aware and can assist you in the growth in your leadership?
Very. We have, especially with the leadership team, I actually let them know that. And it was funny. Our head of marketing, Morgan, she said, that is so funny because you act so quickly on ideas, that there were a couple times where she said, Ben, I have this idea. And I'm like, why isn't it done? Is it done? Can we do it today? Can we do it tomorrow? And I would ask her. And she said it was a 6-week type of process.
Yeah.
And you started pressuring. And so she said, I now know I'm going to bring this idea when I'm ready to execute on it, or when I'm ready to talk about it, versus let's just idea share, poke holes, etc. And you trust me to do my thing. So it was fascinating, the feedback. And that's one of the beauties of transparency, right? Is by doing that, I actually got confirmation that in other ways I was training the team. And now that they know that, they're letting me know, like, impulse control, avoidance later. And it's really fun because we're up-leveling ourselves together.
To connect with today's guest, Ben Hernandez, please go to his website at skytalegroup.com, or you can find his company on social media at SkyTale Group LLC. All right, Ben, so we're ready for your hot take. Let's say your practice is at the peak. You've never made more money before. Is that the best time to sell your practice?
I think a lot of things to consider. If I'm talking spreadsheet, kind of mechanically, the ideal time to sell your practice is actually when it's still ramping upwards. And there are multiple reasons for that. And the biggest reason is you want some meat left on the bone for the buyer, for the investor. So the peak would then imply that there's nowhere else to go. Like, that's the ceiling. So it's very difficult to get this really extreme, supreme valuation if there's nothing else that a buyer can do to improve, top line revenues and EBITDA or profitability. When you talk about it from an owner's perspective, what does peak mean? It means different things, right? To different people. So if I'm an owner, the way that I would think about, should I sell today or not? One is from a macroeconomic level, is now a good time to sell? And today it is. In the medical aesthetic space, a lot of competition, high valuations, and so forth. Okay, great. Checkbox one. The other things that I would consider is just know that they're going to ask you to stick around 4 or 5 years. So if you're at your peak and you're done, like I want to be done yesterday, yes, you should probably sell, right? Because they're going to ask you to stick around 4 or 5 years because you're the one, typically, if you're the owner, high production, et cetera. And then the other things I would look at is, what is your number? Is the number that your company's probably valued at market the right number for you? Does it allow you to retire, to live comfortably, to maybe go do something else that you want? So there's a personal ambition side of it to that. And then on the peak perspective, is this really my peak? Why do I think that? Or have I reached the top of one mountain? And then you look at all these other taller mountains and say, you know what? I want to climb that peak. So that's the other thing to consider. So those are some things to consider. But I would say that generally speaking, like, you probably don't want to sell at the peak. You want it to continue to ramp upward.
How do you find your number? Like, how do you figure out for yourself, this is the number I want to be at whenever I sell, and I will be happy and content and or ready to go on to my next venture?
Yeah. So the way that we go about that is, first of all, this is the valuation of your business. Okay. And is that the right number? And some people say yes or no. And then you have to be sure that you understand everything behind that number, because in these deals, it's not just, oh, I'm valued at 10 million. I get 10 million cash and I go to Bora Bora. There's an equity roll component to it. So there's risk. So maybe you're getting 7 million in this academic example in cash, 3 million in equity, and hopefully the equity turns into something, but you don't want to bank on that. But hopefully it does. So I would look at, what is a true deal structure? What after taxes is something to look at. Recognize that after you sell your business, since you're not an owner, you're no longer distributing to yourself the profits. You're actually paid as an employee. So if you're an injector, producing $1 million a year, maybe you're now making 250,000 because that's market to replace you. And so that's another thing to consider. And then finally, I would talk to a wealth advisor, because they're able to put all these numbers in place. How much do you spend? What's your lifestyle? How much will you spend? Is any of this money going to charity? So on and so forth. And they will let you know, based on these metrics, you will or won't run out of cash when you, I think they call it expire, which I always find it fascinating.
I don't like that word. Expire. That's actually insulting.
Aggressive.
Wow. So I think you want to forecast out your life and understand.
I would call it when you graduate. On to the next season of life.
On to the next phase. I like that better.
Yeah.
We should take this up to the wealth management community.
Well, that's so funny. I have an unopened email from a wealth manager. I'm sorry, Tina and Jake, by the way. I know I owe you all my retirement accounts, all my bank statements, because I'm finally going to start working with a wealth manager. And we had this conversation the other day. And I was like, what should my number be? Because I honestly don't know. Because I know when you sell something, you don't go home with $10 million. First of all, I mean, you go home with a fraction of that. And then you got to think about the rest of your life. So what's next? What are the top 3 things that people are doing after they complete a sale or an acquisition of a practice?
From a seller perspective?
Yeah. What are they doing afterwards?
Yeah. So, one, they're staying on, because, there's an employment agreement that's typically 4 to 5 years minimum. Buyers would love it if you had more ramp in you than that, but minimum 4 to 5 years, they're staying on, doing whatever they were doing yesterday. So if it's a plastic surgeon, he or she's still doing plastic surgery for 4 or 5 years. And the way they put teeth in that is they tie that to the equity portion. So if you leave in year 2, they buy back your equity at typically a pretty punitive valuation. So that's one that they're doing. The second thing that they're doing is they're relaxing a little more from the perspective of, they have this weight lifted off them. Like, I'm not responsible for payroll. I'm not the first person responsible for hiring and so forth. I have more administrative help. So typically they tend to hyper focus a little bit more on their craft, which is kind of cool. And then I would say the third thing a lot of our sellers do is they're thinking about the next phase of their life. And as they do that, we see a lot of them like going to conferences and on panels and speaking about their experience. So they're starting to share with the community how they became successful, how and why they decided to sell. And some of the, they're opening the door to people like them who are considering it and bringing it to life and adding just some really true value. So those are 3 of the things that they're doing. And I would add one more. Some of them take on leadership positions. Yeah, like we were talking about Nicole, for example, who's now CEO. Steve is heavily involved on the board of the medical side of it. So there are also leadership positions that are available that some people tend to like.
That is so cool. I was just meeting with a practice the other day who she is in a similar season. She's being called to speak and step into some higher level roles at Allergan. So she's going to bring in another provider and eventually sell. But as practices are preparing to scale, what are some things that they should be doing as they're building that road towards exit?
Yes. Yeah. If you're thinking of scaling and you're early on in it, I would say first recognize that when you have 1 or 2 locations, you don't have a lot of corporate overhead. Your margins are probably pretty good if you're a well-run practice or practices. That's one. Just recognize that. We'll get to that here in a second. Number 2 is make sure as best you can that your first, second, whatever your genesis location or locations are efficient. Meaning, Does the team, do you have a culture? Do you have core values? Does the team understand what success means in their position? Do they each have a KPI, for example? Make it as objective as possible. Do you have an actual operating system? Do you have SOPs in place? How do you treat patients? How do you bring them back? Patient retention. As many of these things as you can check off, because one of the keys to scaling is how do you replicate this? Okay. And the team in location 1 is not necessarily going to be in location 4. So what you want when it comes time to sell is not a hodgepodge of 10 practices. You want a true group that says, this is how we run. This is how we operate. This is how we treatment plan. This is how we lead. Everything should be as consistent as possible. So make sure that's there. Okay. Then as you think of scaling, just realize that you as the owner are going to have to reinvest. So typically the way our clients do it is through a combination of debt plus their own funds. You're going to have to reinvest because you're going to have to build out the new location, 3 to 6 months of loss of cash flows. So there's a ramp there. And then as you start going 3, 4, 5 locations, you're adding corporate overhead. Maybe you're adding regional manager. Maybe you're adding a head of ops, whatever that may be. These are now non-producers that the business is going to have to help support. And at 4 or 5 locations, you go through what we call the dark tunnel of you have margin suppression. You as an owner may be making less because you're reinvesting in margin suppression. You maybe have 2 practices that are still ramping up. But then when you come out of that, you have this leadership team that then allows you to grow to maybe 7, 8, 9 locations. And now you're leveraging operating, right? Expenses. So now your margins start going up. So just be ready for those things. Realize that it's difficult and realize that you won't know what's going on in locations 5, 6, 7. So you have to make sure that your team is doing that for you.
Social Practice would love to offer your practice a free social media audit. Visit us on social media at Social Practice US. Click the link in our bio to claim your free audit today.
Okay, so we have to talk about social media,
of course,
as we're here. And one thing that we're really interested in is how social media has specifically impacted not only the industry that we're in, but SkyTale as a whole. We're seeing that it's really ramped up the demand for certain services, specifically things like semaglutide. And I'm curious to see how that's affected SkyTale's business.
Yes. Yeah. So from a social media, from our perspective, this industry is really interesting because it's so heavily used.
Yeah.
Especially Instagram. Like I didn't even know what it was when I got into this industry. And now we use it heavily. And it's a really good way for our firm to connect to the people we want to connect to. And we do it by ways that are still true to us. We try to be educational. We try to, show who our team is, to personalize ourselves, because what we learned is that, especially with founder-owned businesses, they don't entrust their firm to another firm. They entrust their firm, their baby, to a person, with founder-led businesses. So we try to personalize it. We try to be educational and help. Certainly from our client perspective, some of them are so well known, and it's fantastic just the way that they use it. From a personalization perspective, I mean, some of them take videos of them driving in their cars, updating people on their day, new services that they're offering or coming out with, little parties that they host, anything educational as well. So it's really fantastic seeing how they use it. And then some of the results that they get out of it. We like to keep up with, how did it help? Like, what's the ROI? Ultimately, that's what we go back to.
Yeah.
And some of the results that they get out of it is fantastic. Semaglutide is a perfect example.
Yeah.
I mean, there's already a million articles out there, and I know it's kind of a divisive subject, but the way that we look at it is you can read the articles, and whether you think it's good or not, I think that's up to each provider, each business owner, obviously. But, some people point to it decreases heart risk and all of these things, right? So maybe you decide to do it or at least research it. Then if you do that, you start promoting it. And we look at the stats of, okay, what's going on here? And if you look at, we have these stats in the office, they're fantastic. Like from late 22 or 23 to now, I mean, the ramp is just this.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. But then you peel back another layer, and a significant portion of these patients are actually first-time patients to medical aesthetics, period.
Wow. It's like the gateway into all of the other services that they offer.
It is so interesting. And that one blew me away because now you're introducing a new type of patient to medical aesthetics, who, by the way, what we see is they do use those services. So that's the third layer that we peeled. Okay. So we have stats on this. So now you're able to say, okay, statistically, I believe in it. I want to offer it. Statistically, I know what it should do.
Yeah.
And then social media helps you implement it because now your patient base knows you're doing it even before they walk into the practice. Or people who aren't your patients yet know that you're doing it and they're looking for someone like you. So that's been a really interesting example for us.
So interesting. And I know you said earlier, just when you were getting into the aesthetics industry, you kind of had to educate yourself. You had to humble yourself and be like, no, there's more that I need to learn about this industry if I want to get into it because of how fast it's growing. And Instagram and just social media in general makes it so easy to learn because it's that search engine base. And so semaglutide, for example, with how quickly it ramped up and the popularity of that service, were y'all able to utilize social media and educating yourself on what that was so that then you could kind of make sure that you were aware of it when then going to the providers and the practice owners?
Oh, 100%. I mean, it kind of leads us in a way. It's one of those kind of leading indicators of, okay, people are starting to talk about this. Therefore, we need to learn it.
Yes.
And so a lot of them, like NPR did a bunch of articles on it. So of course I clicked on those because those are highly educational. But then when we realized, okay, this isn't going away, then we started going to industry research papers and the like. But social media helps guide us, our firm, into, okay, a lot of people are talking about this. We need to become educated in this subject matter because it's going to come up. And you always want to stay ahead, our firm does, of what our clients are going to ask us for, because you don't want to be flat-footed. You don't want to look like you're not prepared. So yeah, social media absolutely helped us to learn about that.
I know we kind of pitch ourselves and position ourselves as the experts in this industry so that they don't have to teach us the services. And it sounds like y'all are utilizing social media to also pitch yourself and put yourself in that position for all of your clients as well, which is social media just makes it so easy.
Yeah. It's just about putting your message out there, being consistent and communicating very clearly what your intention is and what your mission is and who it is that you serve. And social media is the perfect place to do that.
I want to circle back to something that you said as we kind of close out this topic on social media. I love that you said firms don't hire firms, they hire people. And I think social media does such a great job of allowing companies to really get in front of their audience and come off as human beings so that you can kind of be entrusted a little bit more. What are specific techniques that y'all have found successful for SkyTale and utilizing social media in that way?
Yeah, so this is a funny journey. Being in finance, I always thought, if I'm good at what I do, you should come to me. Period. We're good at what we do. We don't need all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And we would post blogs or whatever. And it was actually some marketing team members who said to us, they want to see you. They want to see people. They don't want to see just your blogs. And they had to prove it to me. So I went kicking and screaming into this.
Show me the numbers.
Yeah, exactly. And so we would post pictures of ourselves or stories or what have you. And you got a lot more likes and it's like, okay, clearly that works. But then I have a client. I want to share this oral surgery client. And he said something really neat. He said, I'm a really good oral surgeon. However, you don't know that. He said, so at the end of the day, we're actually not an oral surgery group. They're a multi-site group. He said, we're a marketing firm. And I love that. Yeah. So I clung on to that. So fast forward to today, totally have embraced it. The things that we like to do, it's kind of multifaceted. Like if we do events, we're going to sponsor the Katy Trail 5K. We want to be sure that people know this is who our team is. These are some of the things that they do. If we're at conferences, we like to be personable there as well. And then a podcast has helped a lot because it's allowed us to talk like this. So we get phone calls from people. And what it allows us to do is that first call, I'm not saying, who are you again, Savannah and Mary?
Yeah.
I feel like I already know you because I'm watching this podcast, right? Yes. So we get comments like, oh, you're actually very similar in person or over Zoom or what have you than you are on the podcast. Yeah. So it allows people to already connect with you before they've even met you. Yeah. And we've seen that. So for us, it's been just fantastic because it allows us to really connect to the communities that we're trying to serve. And it's been really, really, really good.
That's so good. I want to wrap this up just on some numbers that I think is interesting with your business model. And, I think of ours too. The clients that we're going to serve, they're looking to make an investment that looks like almost hiring another employee. After the course of a year of signing up for your services or our services, it essentially could be a salary. So it makes that hiring process or that sourcing process easier because they can go to your social media, they can listen to your podcast, and they can really get to know you. And that really helps establish that trust from the very beginning. The other piece for our providers is if you look at the lifetime value of a patient, they come 4 times a year for Botox filler. They come for facials. Maybe they invest in plastic surgery. That number ends up being $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 minimum of that lifetime value. And if you think about, the patient who doesn't know you yet, they're going to look at your social media, your podcast, your content marketing, because they want to know that they can trust you. So you're really just, it's a way to really sell yourself and bridge the gap between the opportunity of you serving more patients. So it all comes full circle. But I'm just glad that you guys understand the value of that. And I understand why, because you guys are also very ambitious yourselves. And you see that to get to where you're trying to go, this is one part of the puzzle. So
we love ambitious people.
We really do. We really do. But Ben, thank you so much for being on our show today. We learned so much.
Yeah, we did. Thank you. I loved this. I love everything we were able to talk about. I feel like it was a lot of tangible information for everybody who is listening. We'll have to have you on again. Yeah. And what a great way to end the season.
I agree.
What
so
a great way.
I will just say, if you are a practice owner, whether you're the provider, you're a founder, investor, and you are looking to scale your practice to multiple locations and or sell, Ben and his team are definitely a group that you need to be working with, SkyTale Group. But thank you so much, Ben, for being here.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed the conversation and also learned quite a bit from you today. So thank you. And I love what you're doing.
Thank you.
Well,
we'll
thanks,
see y'all,
guys.
We'll see y'all next season.
Yes. See y'all next season.
You can find us on social media at the Aesthetic Edit Podcast.
We're on all podcast platforms, so don't forget to subscribe, and we'd love to hear from you.
And follow Social Practice on social media. You can find us at Social Practice US.
If you'd like to become a guest on the podcast, visit our webpage at social-practicetx.com/the-aesthetic-edit.